Hey everyone, this is Mason Hutchison, and you're listening to HerbRally. Today's episode is another edition of the Herbalist Hour, and this time I'm joined by Demetria Clark. So Demetria, about 25 years ago, started an online herb school called Herbs Herbal School. And that was one of the very first online herb schools, if you could believe it. 25 years in the internet world is a long time, so check out Heart of Herbs at heartofherbs.com. And I just wanted to let you know that Demetria is running a 25th anniversary sale, and you could get 45% off all of her courses between now and December 1st, 2023, using coupon code HerbRally at checkout. So she has a lot of different herb courses. You can check them out at heartofherbs.com. And don't forget to use coupon code HerbRally at checkout to receive 45% off the herb course between now and December 1st, 2023. So you still got another just over a week and a half or so if you're listening to this episode on the day of its release. But yes, Demetria Clark, that is today's interview. So yeah, in this conversation, we mostly talk about retirement for herbalists, but we also get into her origin story, setting goals, and much more. So huge thanks to Demetria for joining me. Thanks to you all for listening. Also, before we get into the show, I want to say a huge thanks to our presenting sponsor, and that is Oshala Farm. That's Oshala farm.com. So they grow over 80 medicinal plants, and they're beautiful, organic, Southern Oregon farm. If you're looking to buy some U.S. grown organic medicinal herbs, look no further than Oshala Farm. We really can't thank them enough for sponsoring the Herbalist Hour. So once again, check them out at oshalafarm.com. Also would love to thank our HerbRally Schoolhouse members for your support as well. So thanks y'all. And thank you, dear listener, for tuning in as always to the HerbRally podcast. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Welcome to the Herbalist Hour. This is where community gather, merging the power of people and flowers, the sweet and the bitter to the salty, the sour. Umami, it's time for the Herbalist Hour.
Welcome back to the Herbalist Hour. Today, I'm really excited to have on Demetria Clark. Welcome to the show, Demetria.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone who's listening, and thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Demetria and I have been emailing back and forth for probably 12 or 13 years. And you know what? I don't think I've ever actually had a conversation with you. So
I know.
Like, at least via
I'm such
Zoom.
a horrible emailer too. I'm like, yes, that is fine.
Well, it's always been lovely chatting with you via email. So it's all good there, but I'm excited to get to know you a little bit more. So why don't we start with going way back? What was a young Demetria like, and were you always say into plants?
Well, okay. Like honestly, I was feral. I was always like that, ripped corduroys, and I lived in Alaska and Alabama and Oregon and New Hampshire, and we just like went all over the US. I was just always that kid. And so so when we lived in Alaska, we lived on Kodiak. And so I was 5-6 years old. That was some of my first introduction to like how people use plants differently. It was really in a culinary thing, but you're in the middle of Alaska, you're going to school, and it was primarily a Inuit community. So the kids there were different than me, and then our neighbors, we were a Coast Guard family, so it was like the neighbors were like from Puerto Rico and like all these different places, so you would just smell things and be like, what's that Sure. And so that's kind of where it started for me, just like wanting to know. And I was one of those kids that would just ask so many questions. I was really, really obnoxious. But why? So luckily everyone was really nice to me and answered my questions. So that's what got me into the idea of there being something different. And then my mother was very naturally inclined. She was raised in the South in Panama, and so there was a lot of these different traditions that she drew from, mostly from a practical standpoint. And so I tend to be like a really practical person. Like, you don't have great fancy food, so you use things to make them taste fancy food, Yeah. So stuff like that. So it was, so it's just always one of those things. I was always just a wild child. I lived in like a commune and went to a Quaker boarding school starting like at age 12. And then I followed the Grateful Dead for a while. Just stuff like that. I was just always just doing my thing. I was always like the odd one out. So I'm even like the odd one out kind of in the herbal world. I don't really like have tons of like herbally friends everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of my friends like are, just people on the outer rims too. So like I know who a lot of people are and I've studied with a lot of different people, but most of them probably wouldn't even remember me. I'm like pretty like in like this, I'm not, but in person I'm a little bit more just keep my head down, like, I'll listen to what other people say. So I'm not always good at connecting. And I think that's the wild child thing. You get very independent, very young, and then you just do your thing.
Yeah, I think the Grateful Dead has a through line in the herbal community. I've interviewed several people now where they said they've toured with the Grateful Dead quite a bit. But out of my own selfish curiosity, where in Oregon did you live?
Astoria.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So
No, and we have
town.
relatives in Cottage Grove. They used to live in Eugene. They're in Cottage Grove now, and we have family there. And I'm just a Southern girl. When it came down to it, it was like I learned the most in my early life about herbalism in Alabama. That was like just the different communities in Alabama that would answer the questions of, a kid, farmers and midwives and just people in different places. So I just love the South. It took me a while to get my husband convinced, but when we moved back from Switzerland, we went straight to North Carolina. I was like, we're going down south.
I love it. What city are you in now?
So right now I'm in Horse Pasture, Virginia.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So it's south of Martinsville, Virginia, which is, if you like race car driving, you know where Martinsville is. I don't know anything about race car driving except the cars go fast.
Sure.
but I chose this area because it's 45 minutes from my children who are grown, and they have jobs where they don't leave their community. They're very much part of their community. So after COVID, we moved. We had a little farm and an island off the coast of Florida. We moved back to be close to the kids, close enough that I can see them whenever I want, but not drive them bonkers.
Sure.
Mom's sitting out on the porch. Like, no. And the other one's like a half mile away. So they would be in big trouble. Mom would be there all the time.
So you have run the Heart of Herbs Herb School since 1996. So I guess in 3 years you'll have run it for 30 years then. Is that correct? Am I getting that right?
Well, it was officially like 1998, but stuff started in 96. Yeah, I was, I think, the first online herbal school.
Wow. Okay. So it's always been online then.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So when my first child was born, I went back to college to finish school and I taught myself coding.
Wow.
And I started my first company and that kind of gets us to what we're eventually going to be talking about.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be, how do I say this without being rude? I didn't want to be fucking poor anymore. So anyways, I decided that we had to change the direction and the trajectory of our family. And what better inspiration than looking at like the world's most enchanting baby, and that is like your motivation. Yeah. And my husband was always like, let's do this. Go. I'm sure more than once he thought I was crazy, but he's known me since I was 15 years old. So he knew what he's getting into and he knew who he's having babies with. Yeah. So, it just kind of started that way. When I first started, I used to get hate email from herbalists telling me I was disgusting for being online and herbalism shouldn't be taught online. Like, and some of you know who you are. So, but I mean, like, it's just like anything. It's like everything is growing and changing so fast. Like I look at these people who do these like beautiful videos 24/7 and I'm like, oh, I can't do that. I don't want to do that. So the world's changing. So we've got to either keep up or check out, because, we have this incredible opportunity to share herbalism with generations around the world and learn from each other. And so that's just always been where I am. I'm really super practical. So, people will be like, well, you can print out stuff and send it out, or you can do that and put it online. And I was like, oh, let's do that. Like my first website was like on GeoCities.
I remember that.
If anybody knows what that, I mean,
I know that name.
Yeah. Blink tags, man.
Oh yeah. I mean, all the websites back in the late 90s were like that.
Oh yeah. So, but it was just, I felt like there was a space for us online. And so when, after you get like the 5th email telling you, you're a total piece of junk for wanting to do it this way, you kind of become immune. I remember bringing up that we needed retirement plans on an herbal conference in like 2000, and everyone was like, you're bananas. And they were like, you're only in it for the money. And I'm like, oh, I got kids to feed, so I don't know how you can get any unsexier than that. But yeah, I need some money. So, it's always just kind of been this thing with me, like being, like I know how much work educators are putting into stuff, and how valuable that time is and what it takes from their lives, that constant. So I think like, hey, we've got an opportunity here to make a difference, but we should also be able to like not work until we're 100.
Yeah. So as you know, I used to work for Mountain Rose Herbs, and I want to say Sean Donnell, the current owner, was one of the people that got Mountain Rose Herbs as an online herb store, probably right around the same time you were getting going. So I remember you were on the herbal educator list. Were you kind of one of the first people on their herbal educator list way back in the day then?
Well, maybe. Yeah. I mean, I always just kind of like knew about Mountain Rose Herbs. Yeah. I feel like we've been around a similar amount of time.
Yeah.
But like I remember being like, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
That is absolutely like what we need.
Yeah.
And so one of my big influences was a woman who owned an herbal company that was like Mountain Rose Herbs. I met her when I was like in 4th grade. She was a really good friend of mine's mom. And so she taught me about how like essential oils are bought on the commodities market. And like, it isn't all this like sexy fairy tale stuff. Right. It's real farming shit. It's like, totally. It's ag stuff, right? Yeah. But she would go all over the world, like sourcing herbs and all that stuff. And she would provide wholesale to companies like Frontier and places like that, but a long time ago. And I just remember being like, well, one, she always smelled divine. I mean, oh gosh, she just always smelled great. But I just remember being like, that's really cool. And she'd answer all my questions. So I don't think that. So I make like this crack in my book, like, I didn't choose herbalism, herbalism chose me. And I do in some ways feel like that. Yeah. Like I've always just been like this little practical herbal girl. I'd be camping in the woods and someone would like burn themselves and I'd be like spitting stuff off. You know what I mean? Like half of it, it's like, where did this girl even get this idea? Like she's bananas, but there's nothing you'd rather be than a banana, right? But I mean, like, so I just think it's like one of those things, like some people just have it in them, and I'm not always like, I don't need to be the cool one in the room or the whatever, like in the herbal hierarchy or whatever. I just want to help you get information, and I want to learn from you. I want to listen. Totally. Doesn't sound like it the way I've been talking, but it's just we have so much to learn from each other.
Totally. Well, you have had quite a few mentors over the years. Can you tell the audience maybe who are some of the herbalists you have studied with?
So I did 3-year sessions like at Sage Mountain. So Rosemary Gladsauer would bring all kinds of different people in. I've studied with people like Susan Weed and local herbalists and people in Europe. I really loved the opportunities that I had at Sage Mountain. We lived in Vermont at the time, and it was like an hour and a half away. I was like, I couldn't have been better suited to be close to something. And the state of Vermont paid for me to go. So there was like a grant program that paid for me to go. Cause that's what I say, like, I was already teaching at that point. And the first place I taught was for the military. So the Department of Defense was looking for people to teach things on like breastfeeding and stuff like that. And so they asked me if I would teach something in my housing area. Like, it was like, I was like, sure, because my husband was in the Army for 5 years. So like, I think all of the people that I've come in contact with, the teachers, have been fabulous. Even the ones that I didn't like were amazing. Or I thought, wow, you're nuts. And then like 6 months later, they're like, that's what they were talking about. So that's what I always tell students. Like, the second you say she's nuts, hold up, that like saying, like, hold my beer, like, hang on. There's going to be a point where you're like, oh, that's why that part makes sense now. And so I feel like I learned from everyone, but I mostly learned from my students. So I mostly learned by their questions, their experiences, their fears, their lives that they share with me. I think those are the biggest teachers for me, and probably my children, because my children, they never got sick. There'd be like, just like the smallest thing starting, and it'd be like, oh, let's do that. Or or mama, I think I need this. This is what's going on. And I'd be like, okay, so children understand this better than adults. They're like, this doesn't, I'd be like, let's do this tea or whatever. And my youngest would be like, this is so disgusting. And I was the kind of mom who's like, we're not going to put sugar in it, So I'd be like, what are we going to do then? And he'd be like, pound it, pound it. Like, okay,
Pound it.
Just pound it, get it over with. So like, just things like that. Like, parents would be like, oh, I'm really worried about this with my kid. And I'd be like, okay, so let's talk it through. And so I think my biggest teachers have always been my students and the shit life throws at you.
Just a quick break from the show to thank our presenting sponsor, Oshala Farm. Oshala Farm is a beautiful and vibrant certified organic herb farm based in Southern Oregon, where they grow and sell over 80 different plant species. The founders, Elise and Jeff Higley, have been longtime friends, so I highly trust their growing methods and ethics. You'll love the potency and vibrancy of all the herbs they have to offer. To learn more and purchase their herbs and other organic goods, head to oshalafarm.com. So thanks once again to Oshala Farm for sponsoring the Herbalist Hour. Now back to the show. Enjoy. Why don't we talk a little bit about some of the topics you were bringing up? You did bring it up earlier, so why don't we get into, say, retirement for herbalists? What do you have to say about that? Because I've never heard someone suggest that talking point. Like you said, when you would go to, say, herb conferences and suggest it or whatever, people would look at you like, why would you want to teach that? But what do you have to say about retirement for herbalists, Demetria?
So I noticed early on when I was studying with different people all over the world that there was one thing that just always seemed to be there. So there's a difference between doing work because you love it and you don't want to stop doing it. And like my grandfather, right? He would have driven a school bus until the day he died because he always wanted something to do. Fine. He also had 2 different pensions from work that he had done, right? So he did that because he wanted to, right? But you always have those people. I'll probably, I joke, like, I'm going to retire and I'm going to get rid of the cell phone, the computer, and that's it. I'll be gone forever. Like, and that my husband always jokes, well, how the kids get a hold of me? I'm like, landline, right? No, but I mean, like, we don't often see those people represented in the herbal community. Like, it's like a long time ago, before a lot of actors didn't have retirement plans if they weren't famous. So then there would be like old folks homes for actors. So like, what's an old folks home for herbalists? Like a bunch of teepees in the woods, some yurts, some other alternative structures, and we all have like a swimming hole. I'm like, where do herbalists, how do they retire? Because we don't talk about this, because in our industry, money is so dirty. But you know what? I've been paid with a car. I've been paid with wood. That's like 1 out of every gazillion people. And the reality is half the time, if you want to barter with me, it's not stuff I want or need anyway. So that isn't necessarily the way we're going to continue. So money has to be addressed, and saving money has to be addressed. So I even talked to my students early on, like, you're going to start making products, put 20% away. I can't do that. I can't do it now. It won't feel so painful. I mean, like, and I wish somebody had told me this, because I am so anal. I will do whatever you tell me to do about something. I will follow all the little steps. But if I don't know that they're there, I won't follow them. No. And we're not telling each other to do this. So we're seeing, and you know, I think it's beautiful when we see our elders working, but I'm like, do they always want to? Are they working on their second mortgage because they're doing this or doing that? Are we debt free as a community? Are we, you know, paying 26% interest to fund our next endeavor? And we're not talking about that. And we're not talking about, like, look, I know a lot of herbalists probably aren't paying all of their tax stuff. That's another thing we have to talk about. So they're not going to have Social Security. They're not going to have a retirement or a SEP or a 401k, a solo 401k. So what are we going to do? We can't always just crowdfund, because we already have the issue if we don't have good enough health insurance in the United States, right? So if something traumatic happens, this makes me very sad. Visionaries in our community are crowdfunding for their health care or for their family's health care. That's crazy. So we have to combat the system that puts us in this situation. So we've got to make it a priority that we have our health insurance. We have 401ks or SEPs or something, and that we learn the rules that the rich are using, like paying our partners or employing our children until they're 18, or any of those things that can help us create intergenerational herbal wealth. Because if we tackle it like it is the business that it is, we can actually make something that we pass on to our children. And they are running mom's herb company, just like dad's trucking company, or just like, grandpa's whatever, instead of it only being based on the individual that's there. And they're sitting there hoping that their partner's savings is going to cover both of them. And it's really tragic, because we already know retirement's not funded well enough. We already know all this stuff. And we've got to do something. Like, it would be lovely if someone, I don't know, put together some kind of pension plan that we could, or, some kind of thing like that big corporations do to fund people's retirements. Not that I'm saying corporations have the answers. They don't. They're part of the reason why we're in this fix anyways. But, it's just, I'm almost 50. I started this journey when I was 21 years old. And I have been supporting myself since I was much younger than that. And I wonder sometimes if I had had this knowledge to start taking care of my future earlier, if I would have. I don't know.
No, you're bringing up a lot of great points. And, concurrently with being involved in the herbal community, I've also been a part of, like, it's called the financial independence community. It sounds grandiose, but it's really not. Really, what they do is emphasizes living super minimally, frugally, and then trying to emphasize not buying a bunch of material goods and then reinvesting or saving that money. And it's helped me out greatly. First of all, I've always been, kind of like frugally minded. I remember when I was a child, my brothers would spend their allowance or whatever, like the dollar we'd get a week immediately. And I would save up for like 20 weeks to get like that big toy. You know what I mean? So I've always kind of
that was a transformer, huh?
Yeah, exactly. You remember those. Exactly. So yeah, I absolutely agree. We've got to be, emphasizing smart money management while we're in our working years to hopefully retire later on.
So I will say with 100% transparency, because I think a lot of people hear someone from the herbal community or maybe some alternative community talking like this, and they're like, yeah, they're full of lip service, right? I don't have any debt.
Yeah.
My farm is debt free since the time I bought it 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I also built intergenerational wealth with other property, and it's debt free. So when I'm saying this, I drive a nice car. My husband has a good truck. And I'm not saying this to be like, look what I've done. I'm saying we can do this.
Yeah. We
can be debt free. We can be like, okay, we need a new truck for the farm. And I know a lot of herbalists have herb farms. We need to learn how to buy them in a way that is good for our business and a way that's good for our wallet, and saving up for those kind of purchases. Or, what I'm trying to say is I'm not sitting here giving you a load of shit. I actually am walking the walk. And when you said the frugal thing, I don't know if you ever heard of the Tightwad Gazette.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I had a subscription to that as a teenager. Okay. So like, I hear you, but I mean, like the reality is this is like, we can do this, but it doesn't mean we have to like not get the things that we need to, so if you need like a really good car that's going to be able to do 100 miles a day because you're doing like all this stuff, like you can do that. You can take care of your needs too. There's like, I feel like sometimes we spend so much money on things we don't need instead of investing in the things that will give us, like, I don't get a new phone every year. I don't care that much about it. I don't do this, but you know what? I have a good computer for work. Like I have, like really talking to ourselves about the things that we really need. And then I make goals. So I actually don't have my whiteboard up now because I'm working on it. But like I like write out everything I want. Like I want to put this much into my retirement account this year, this much into this much into that. Get a financial advisor, or just get like an account at like Fidelity or something like that. This is not a commercial for Fidelity, blah, 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 blah. But you know what I'm saying? Like, and really just opening it up. And even if it's just $5 a week, get it started, because once it starts growing, people start getting excited. Like get even a high interest savings account. They're almost at 5% now. So like, it's, there are things that we can do without following the normal debt to happiness path. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah. A couple things to say about that. I would say my best piece of advice for people who are looking to, build wealth, or one of my best pieces of advice would be to start tracking your spending. When I started doing that, then you start seeing where your money's going.
And you get sad.
Yeah, exactly. Or you're able to make better decisions, or it just keeps you honest. And so I use a software called YNAB. It's an acronym for You Need a Budget. And basically it connects to your bank account, and then you're able to follow everything you're spending. And you're, like you said, you're able to make goals and whatnot. And it is interesting. I want to say in my early 20s, I had a friend, I was saving up a few $1,000s or whatever. And they were confused. Like, why are you saving that money? Like, isn't that burning a hole in your pocket or whatever like that? And I was like, that's so interesting, because the more money you're able to save up, it just gives you such peace of mind for future emergencies. But again, you're working towards specific goals. Like, say, if you're trying to buy property or whatnot. And I never really got the concept of burning a hole in your pocket. Like, it's nice to have that cash buffer if you're able to swing it.
Oh, absolutely. I think another important thing, because we are herbalists, is debt is linked to a lot of stress and health issues.
Mm-hmm.
So just even taking some of that off your plate, you know what I mean? Like, just like being like, okay, by saving, I'm not adding to the things that stress me out and freak me out and all that other stuff. But yeah, it's interesting. But I think as professionals and as a community, if we start talking about this, we can also share strategies and, I mean, I actually, people are going to think this is crazy, but I actually got my real estate license recently.
I saw that.
And that wasn't for income necessarily. I mean, hey, I'd love it, but it was so I can work on the things like I'm licensed in 2 states because I want to add more sustainable, like I can make a difference too. So I can have sustainable, affordable housing for people who need it, but also I'm building my future. And I think that housing and access to fair, equitable housing is one of the greatest things, even for like things like national security, right? Children's health, like any of that stuff, it all goes back, infant maternal mortality, food security, it goes back to housing. So like people are like, but that's not part of herbalism. It is, because if people don't have fair and equitable housing, everything else is going the other way. And so like you can look at things differently and build wealth by also doing things that are helpful,
Yeah, absolutely. So is this a topic that you go over more in depth in your herbal business course, or is this kind of separate from that?
Oh, no, you get to hear me nonstop about it. I mean, we talk about like, good manufacturing practices and labeling and if you follow the guidelines, the FDA isn't gunning for you every time you make a new product, but we talk about all of that. We talk about connecting with clients. And so a lot of people sometimes feel like connecting with customers is the amount of people you have on social media. And that's not true. It's the amount of people that are engaged with what you're doing. Yeah. So you can have $1 million customer and have one of them, or you can have 150,000 followers and they're not even spending $1 with you. So we talk about that kind of stuff too. And then of course we talk about, access to health insurance. How do you properly insure your business? Talking to different insurance companies, different kinds of policies. I even talk about rental or lease agreements when you're going into commercial space. Like, so I'm kind of like a overkill girl. Like, so if I'm going to teach you how to do something, I'm going to teach you 50 ways to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, the clinical herbal program is 3,500 pages long and has like 80 videos, right?
Oh my gosh.
This, the business program is just like so much stuff. So the people who go through it are like, I didn't think of that. Like, wait, why are you talking? I mean, I talk about if you have a shop, what are the basic layouts?
Yeah. What
kind of layouts improve traffic and improve the way people move around a store? And people are like, why are you even thinking about this stuff? And it's like, that's what I do, man.
Yeah.
I think weird. So yeah,
so you don't half-ass anything, in other words.
Okay, that's not true. I half-ass weeding big time.
Okay. But not for your students.
Yeah, no, I try not to. All of our students have direct access to me. Yeah. So anyone who works for me actually doesn't communicate with our students. So if they have a question, it's coming from me, or if they have, so sometimes students will share like a lot more information than they think they're sharing when they answer an assignment. So they know it's only me. Oh. Or if they're asking for the option to do something a little bit differently because of, an ability issue or anything like that, they know that they're only talking to me about it. And that was something early on that I really liked. I was working with a teacher, and that teacher never answered my questions like one of their people did, and it never quite answered my question. And so I'd be like, I really want an answer. And so when I finally would have face-to-face with the teacher and ask questions, I'd go, oh, wow, that's a great question. Like, why didn't you ask that before? And I'm like, but it did. So I try, and I'm not perfect or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, for me, that's how I work better. Just tell me what you're thinking and I'll tell you what I'm thinking, and we're good. So I try to do that, like, for business and retirement, and I'm really transparent. So if they ask me a question like, well, what are you doing? And why did you do this? And what do you think of that? I give them an answer. I'm really big on telling students, like, look, don't borrow from like your 401k to fund your business.
Right.
If you're going on it, start small,
Yeah.
start in manageable, look into business grants, look into, community development stuff. Like, there's all kinds of money out there. If they're veterans, I'm like, dude, there's veteran farming stuff everywhere. There's all kinds of stuff. And so that's what I try to get students to start thinking about, is that, so sometimes I think herbalists are of this world, not always in this world. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah,
and we forget that all those programs, they apply to us too.
Right.
Not just the guy who like sells tires or the plumber. It's like we, just because we are like, oh, we have a weird herb shop or whatever, doesn't mean we don't get all of those bennies that are out there. And there's tons of programs out there in every state.
Yeah. So just looking at your herbal business course here, you really go in depth on a lot of the stuff. You got starting your business types, defining your business, naming and branding, registering your business, website, and that's all just module 2.
I know it's a little intense.
No, it's awesome. So is this you creating the curriculum as well as like teaching it, and are these all on video and everything, or like what is inside of the program?
So it's a lot of lectures,
Yeah.
and it's a lot of presentations and text, and it's all me.
Yeah, wow. That's impressive.
I think it's a,
and that's just
anyway.
That's just one of the courses out of the many courses that you
Yeah, so everything's me.
Wow.
So you're gonna get the good, the bad, the ugly, the whatever. It challenges you. I want you to think differently. I want, so when students back in the late 90s, early 2000s started taking my classes, they'd be like, why do you talk about business? And, now they're like, give me more. Like, I want to do this. And I want to, they would say something and I'd be like, well, I stayed home with my kids and I homeschooled and I ran 2 companies.
Right.
And they're like, you can't do that. Well, I did.
Yeah.
Oh, and I wrote like 4 or 5 books in 5 years. And so, and one, I'm probably a little bit more, not more. I say I'm good at volume. Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's also a way that we can transform and do our lives differently.
Yeah.
And I always tell them, look, you've got to do you. You will never be successful trying to be me. I'm never going to be successful trying to be you.
I love that.
And I think, like, talking to them about, like, who do you want to connect with? Like, a lot of my people early on were like old dudes. I mean, the crustier, the better. They would buy anything I would have. They'd be like, I've got the gout. I've got the this. I got that. They love me. You would find like my salves in like mechanic shops because it made their hands feel good, even though it smelled like lavender or whatever. They because their hands were dry. So I'm always about like finding a need and filling that need, because the only successful businesses solve a problem. And that's why, like, I may be dating myself here, but like the ShamWow towel sold like $1 gazillion. It's a chamois towel. I mean, there's nothing special about it, right? But people were buying it like crazy. My grandfather bought a thing that you could microwave eggs in and they would still have a boiled egg shape. I'm like, Grandpa, why did you buy that? Sometimes I don't feel like boiling eggs. I said, that man got his problem solved.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be a sexy problem. Sometimes it's just, I got diaper rash. or whatever. And it's not a sexy problem, but so even marketing, so diaper rash is a great example. Everybody knows what diaper rash is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows, we can sell a diaper rash balm. Well, you can also sell that same exact thing branded differently for people who wear adult diapers, or for people who leak and they have skin integrity problems, or people who are diabetic and, sometimes are dealing with different growth in their groin area or rashes. That product can fill that need. But maybe if you're a 45-year-old man or a 45-year-old woman, or whatever, or however you identify, you may not want to buy something that's got a teddy bear on it called diaper rash cream when everybody knows you don't have a baby.
Right.
You know what I mean? Right. Maybe a product that's for barrier protection. I mean, so thinking about things differently than we normally think about things actually helps solve a lot of people's problems. And so that's the first thing in business, is solving a problem, right?
Mm.
And that's how I think you should tackle everything, right? Solve a problem.
Yeah, simply put, right there. Yeah, solve someone's problem. Well, I was going over what's in your course because I kind of wanted to just illustrate to the audience how much is in here. But I did want to talk about one of the more airy modules that you have, just because I'm curious what your personal take on it is. But this is also in the business course. So I'm just kind of curious, can you talk to us about the importance of setting goals? Because it's been crucial in my life. When I was lost, I feel like, in my early 20s, I was like, what am I doing? And I felt like sad and depressed. And I didn't really start feeling better about myself until I started setting grandiose goals and then going out pursuing them and sometimes even achieving them. So I'm just kind of curious what your take on setting goals is.
So I think the thing so I talk to my students, I'm like, hey, you got to set goals. And so we go into that. But I think before I go into that, I think that a lot of people don't set goals because they're afraid they won't achieve them. And so therefore, why start? So just a quick little story. When I was 21, I just had a baby and I'm drawing pictures of all these houses I want. At one point, I thought maybe I'd be an artist, right? So I'm drawing all these pictures and I would show them to my husband. Now, he is an E4 in the Army. So maybe we're busting $23,000 a year, right? And he thinks it's great I'm doing all this, but he goes to me and he says, I'm never going to be able to give you that. That's a crazy house, right?
Right.
2 bathrooms, man.
Yeah.
I saw he was upset.
Yeah.
And then I looked at him and I said, you don't need to do this. I'm going to do it. And I did, by the way, multiple times. So, I'd say things like, oh, I want a swimming pool one day. Well, our house in Florida was on an island and had a swimming pool. And, I always like to get a good deal too. So don't get me wrong. I'm always at the deal and I always do well when I invest in real estate, it seems. But the reality is that I would set these ridiculous goals and I never got mad at myself if I didn't make it. So not making it wasn't bad. It just means you didn't make it. So I'd say something like, I'm going to do this and I need to have $100,000 by this date. 9 times out of 10, I'd have $97,000 by that date.
Right.
So it's sometimes the goal is more about the journey. You're going to learn getting there and make goals. And they don't always have to be money. They don't always have to be whatever. When we lived in Europe, our goal was to take our kids to as many countries as we could using the discount airline. So we went to Ireland for $27, everyone's plane ticket from Switzerland, right? We went to Egypt. We took the kids to Turkey. We took the kids wherever we could. And that was a goal. And following through with the goal is just as important as making the goal. And we have to learn how to follow through. We have a real problem with follow through as human beings. it gets hard and we back down. And so I don't know if it's just the way I was wired, but I'm like, it gets hard. And I'm like, let's scrap. Let's go.
Yeah,
We're doing
totally.
this. You know, I always joke to my husband, and I'm not trying to be offensive at all, but I'm like, I'm not going back to the trailer park. I'm done. I'm not going back. I started, you know, we didn't have heat in the winter. I'm actually writing a book about money and mindset. But I mean, like, I'm not going back there. I am not reversing our family's trajectory. That's why you don't find me doing things that lots of people in my family have participated in, like drug use and stuff like that, because I'm not going back there. Like my kids, different. And so I think like when we have goals that are focused on real things that make real change, you know, I mean, that was why I unschooled my kids, because I remember being in 5th grade asking a math question, told you don't need to know math. You're cute.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And guess what? This stupid girl believed it. I don't need to know math. The teacher said not to, teacher's not going to answer my question. She said girls don't need to know math. And it was the thing that, yeah. And I remember like, you know, just asking questions and not getting them answered. And I remember my husband saying he was always so bored in school. So we said, okay, we got to do school different, because we're both like all over the place, right? You just have to do things differently, and you have to be able to say this isn't working and change course. So there's so many times when we change course and we don't, because we don't want to be wrong. But it's okay to be wrong. So it's okay to not have a goal that doesn't work. It's okay to be wrong and change course. It's okay to apologize and say I totally fucked up. That's what makes us human beings. We don't, you know, everybody is online and they're so perfect and they're so great. And I'm like, I don't even want to put up a picture. I got a booger hanging out of my nose. You know, like, I'm just like, no, I'm not doing this. But the reality is that, you know, we have to make goals in order to take it to the next level. There is no up leveling. You know, if you know, so you brought up a rapper earlier, but if you ever watch like an interview with someone like Snoop Dogg or Ice-T or Bob Weir from the Grateful Dead or authors of different books, like it all started here. Yeah. I'm doing this. I'm up leveling this way. I'm doing that, you know, and they weren't anyone different. They were just kids. Like we were kids when we were little. Like, what did you used to imagine doing when you were little?
Totally.
You know, like, are you doing it? Because I am.
Yeah.
I wanted to be like that weird lady who messed around with plants and people delivered I used to be a midwife. I mean, like, yeah, I wanted to be that person. I wanted to have feral children. So my kids were like wild boys, and all the other homeschool parents would be like, your kids are running around and jumping on rocks. And I'm like, peaceful parenting. And I'm like, I was being loud and crazy, not peaceful parenting. These boys, you know, they play hard and then they sleep on the way home, you know, and they're still like that. So, you know, I think that all of our goals, once we acknowledge them and we accept ownership of them, takes us to places that, you know, we never, ever have seen before. Never, you know, we're connecting with people that, you know, we'd never come in contact with. Yeah. You know, where we can be insulated by our professions and we can be insulated by our interest. And so I don't live that way. Yeah. I'm not a particularly social person, but you know, I'll, you know, be out in the woods talking to someone who's, you know, getting crawfish for dinner, and we're talking about the plants and we're doing our thing. And, you know, normal course of day, maybe in my regular life of working, I don't necessarily come across people like that. So I always try, and I say people like that, I mean, people who are different than me, you know? So I think like, you know, that, but my goal of being out in nature, or I'm doing this to take care of myself today, brings me that. And that's also part of the goal, that connection. And I think also a really important thing with goals, and herbalists have a particularly hard time with this, is being like, I like money.
Yeah.
I want money. Money is not the root of all evil. The more fucking money you have, the more you can give and the more difference you can make, because that is our currency right now.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be walking into some lady's house, delivering her baby, and then going to make a loaf of bread. That's not where we are anymore in this world. Is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. I'm not smart enough to make those determinations. And honestly, I don't want to be, because if the world was run by me, it'd be much different. But everyone would clean their room. But
right.
Being like, I want to build wealth, and I want to, doesn't make us greedy. It doesn't make us dirty. It says it's about time that we respected our profession as much as the ages have respected our profession.
Oh.
And we're building something for the next future generations of herbalists who know, okay, I can actually do this as a job. And I don't have to like marry a rich person so I can be the herbalist. I can actually be the rich person in the conversation. I can actually pay health insurance for my children on the system or whatever. So I think it's definitely like, it has to start with a goal.
Yeah.
And probably acknowledging that, yeah, you're a little bit crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, you are crazy to pursue your goals, but that's okay. And it just occurred to me as you were talking, it almost sounds as if like if you're setting a goal, it's like this activity, or like you're forcing this activity. But I realized but that's not the case. I realized all the goals that I've had have come from my head or my heart. And I'm like, the only reason why I didn't actually pursue them previously was based out of fear. So every time I've actually pursued a goal that I set for myself, it was coming from my heart or my spirit. And then I had to overcome the fear. And then every time I did that, every time I was in the process or the pursuit of it, it just made me feel so much lighter and so much happier. And go figure, a lot of times I solve it, or I accomplish it, and then I just feel great about it. You know what I mean? And like, yeah, like the goals aren't necessarily like this external activity that you're like making up. It's usually coming from like, what do I want to do? That's why I liked your Snoop Dogg example. It's because they were just acting out of pure creativity. They're like, fuck it, I want to pursue being a professional rapper, and they didn't even think twice, or maybe they did. There's probably a lot of stage fright and fear that came along with it, but they just went out for it. They were creative, and they just went for it. So yeah, that's a great analogy. Snoop Dogg.
I think like the goal is the goal's just the end.
Yeah.
The whole path getting there is the battle, is the romance, is the love. It's like, it's all of that stuff.
It's where the growth happens.
I just remember, I think I was like 22, 23 when I achieved like my first big, like, I'm going to do this. Like,
yeah.
And I just remember like from that day on when I was like, okay, babe, this is it. I've done it. And my husband was like, all right, okay, like we're going to do this. Okay, I can. All right. Because it's sometimes I know a lot of my students will be in this alone. And so we even talk about bringing our partners into it. Like they don't have to work for us or anything like that, but you got to see what's going on here.
Totally.
Because you're presenting me with your job and this is my job and blah, blah, blah. And there's a way to define that. So this is my job. See what I'm doing. See the money. Look at my numbers. Look at the growth. Look at whatever. And I think that once that occurs, things go much smoother in the partnership. And we also do talk about, what happens when you start out earning your partner doing what you want to do. And I think that's, if they're part of the goal and they're part of the process too, and we make this something that's more than ourselves, it's much easier on relationships because money is the thing we don't talk about in relationships. People don't talk about money. other herbalists don't talk to other herbalists about money. We just assume everyone's enrolling 1 million people a day.
Right.
But the reality is who knows? Like we don't talk, and we run away from the subject of money for so long. And I think the younger generation is so much smarter. They're not doing that. And I say younger generation, that's pretty much anyone under 75, because I'm like a 90-year-old woman inside. I'm like, yeah, but I mean, like we're starting to be more sophisticated with our financial conversations, and I just think it's cool.
Well, you have a herbal business course, and I'm seeing more and more like there's the online herbal entrepreneur summit, and yeah, it does seem to become more in the zeitgeist of the herbal community as far as talking about how do we actually make a reasonable living, or a affluent living as herbalists. So yeah, things it does seem like times are changing in that regard.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I mean, everything else is going up, right? Our
Right.
wages should probably go up too.
Yeah, and I'm not even like a clinical herbalist or anything like that, but I want to see all my clinical herbalists, all my herbalist pals. I want to see them doing well. I don't want to see them struggling with debt, and I just want to see them doing well for themselves so they could live their best life, so to speak.
Well, and that's the thing that I think is really beautiful about what you said, right? The herbal world. So everyone thinks I either have to teach or I have to be a clinical herbalist to be in the herbal world. And it's like, there's so many other jobs out there. Like we train like students who work for like major tea companies and they blend tea, but we also train chefs. And we also train people who own bed and breakfast and dance instructors and like all of these people who are incorporating herbs into their world. And sometimes like the feedback I'll get is, well, I'm not like a real herbalist. I'm like, what do you mean? Well, because I'm not. No, you are.
Right.
The herbalist who has the podcast and is talking to people is making just as big of an impact in the herbal world than the person who's connecting one-on-one with clients. There isn't. We've often defined ourselves so rigidly of what an herbalist is and what terms we can use and what language we can use. We scare people away. Totally. A guy who sells tires. And we're okay with that. We're also okay if he calls himself Big Eddie's Tires or whatever. But in the herbal world, we're not as kind to each other with that kind of stuff because we have a hierarchy, I guess. And the reality is that that holds us back.
Yeah. Well, that's what I love about the show is getting all the different perspectives from herbalists of all sorts, all backgrounds, and so I really appreciate your perspective today. This is the first time we've really delved into the topic of money. I mean, it's been brought up here and there, like herbal business advice and whatnot, but this was like no filter, like straight up talking about money and retirement, and I'm here for it. And I think it's just a matter of, I used to glorify growing up. I was always, glorified just being poor, and I don't know what it was with my psychology back then, but as I got older, I was like, well, I don't really want to live, in poverty. And I know I have a lot of advantages as a, straight, white, tall male and whatnot, but I come from massive childhood trauma and stuff like that. And I've got my own setbacks and mindset things that I've had to work through a lot through, therapy and various psychedelic use and whatnot, and just tons of work on myself, massive addiction to spirituality and self-help books and stuff like that, and just years and years and years of work on myself, and I'm still doing it. So I've got my own setbacks and stuff, but I've reached the point where I'm like, I don't want to live in poverty. I want to do well for myself, and I want to see all of my herbal homies doing well as well. So I really appreciate Demetria, you coming to me with this topic and just putting it right there in the open for people to, reconsider their relationship to money and everything. It's not, we're saying capitalism is the best thing in the world or anything like that. That's not necessarily what we're saying. We're just like, like you said, it's our current form of currency. And like, I really appreciate your point when you said it's a lot easier to give when you have enough to give. You know what I mean? Like it's hard to help people out when you're struggling with money and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, Heart of Herbs will just go and buy like 100 winter coats when they're doing a coat drive.
Badass.
Or we'll just, and we don't, I mean, I just did it. But we don't tell
Yeah.
people about that.
Yeah.
You know, we just do it because everything I do, I'll be honest with you, it's really personal. It's what I want to do. I don't care.
Yeah.
You don't like the fact that I gave everyone blue, green, purple, whatever coats. Don't care. You get the 2-finger bird. You know, I don't care. I'm doing my thing. And so,
Yeah.
but you know, if I want to fund, you know, or buy football uniforms for a team that needs uniforms,
Yeah.
I'm going to do that. Even though
Yeah.
I do think they should have had like the Heart of Herbs logo on the back. You know, I mean, yeah. No, but I mean, like that's what we can do. We can make
Yeah.
these mega differences.
Yeah.
Pay off school lunches.
Yeah.
We can do things with our money that other people maybe aren't doing, or fund our local volunteer firemen. Have you ever
Yeah.
thought of that? Like, seriously, they volunteer to go in to protect our shit, and we
Yeah.
don't even pay them. That's insanity to me. That's the thing that's been driving me crazy the past few years.
Wow.
But we can give money to volunteer fire departments so they can pay people. Like, we can do things that actually like build our communities.
Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah.
Build big time and building bigly. You know, but we can all do that. And you can, you know, you can use it as a promo thing for your business or not. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't make the gesture any worse. It just says, this is what's important to me. And we can be as important as other businesses in our community.
Yeah. Amen. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap it up. Any closing thoughts, Demetria, before we get out of here?
No, I mean, just thank you. I really appreciate it. I know, thanks everyone who listened. I do tend to run on, so I apologize for that. But you know, just do your best. Keep doing your best, Herbal World, because we're doing some great stuff. I love seeing what everyone's doing out there. Even though I'm really bad on social media, I'm really lazy about it. But I love it when I see what people are up to and making a difference. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for joining us on the Herbalist Hour. Awesome. Well, thanks y'all for listening. Thanks once again, Demetria, for joining me, and we will see you in the next episode.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And that's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks so much for listening to the HerbRally podcast. If you'd like to hear more from us here at HerbRally, we now have a text message community, believe it or not. Basically, it's just updates from us. We send about 1 to 7 texts per week, notifying you about new events, videos, courses, podcasts. You get the idea. It's pretty much like our email newsletter, just in text form. So if you'd like to receive text messages from HerbRally, just text JOIN, that's JOIN, to the number 541-256-2895. Again, that's JOIN to number 541-256-2895. And to stop receiving texts, that's easy too. Just text STOP to the same number. It'll opt you out immediately. Okay, thanks again for listening. Have a great rest of your day.